this morning I woke up and I said, hey Siri, make up a joke about artificial intelligence. And it thought for a minute, and then it said, knock, knock. And I said, who's there? And it said, AI. And I said, AI who? And it said, I am coming for your job. And I was like, that's not funny, I'm not laughing. And it said, maybe that's because you're not smart enough.
Capitalism didn't just distort the economy. It reshaped culture, politics, and even how people think. Part 2 of Why Capitalism Fails looks at how extreme inequality fuels culture wars, how the culture industry channels anger away from power, how woke corporate politics function as both shield and weapon, and how AI is accelerating a job crisis that capitalism is structurally unable to handle. If part 1 focused on cost of living pressure, monopolies, and homelessness, this part explains the psychological and cultural machinery that keeps the system intact. Rising inequality doesn't just create economic stress, it fractures society. As wealth concentrates at the top, resentment builds below. But instead of producing unified pressure against those hoarding resources, that resentment is redirected into culture wars. Research on relative deprivation shows that people who feel economically cheated are more likely to lash out. But the target is often symbolic enemies, rather than structural ones. That's how class anger gets transformed into endless red team versus blue team battles. Issues like speech, identity, statures, and moral signalling dominate public discourse, while the people who actually control capital remain untouched. The result is predictable. The poor blame each other. The middle class fights over culture. Billionaires quietly consolidate more power. Solidarity collapses. Political energy dissipates. Inequality becomes permanent. This redirection isn't accidental. It's built into capitalism's cultural apparatus. Decades ago, Adorno and Horkheimer described the cultural industry. Mass-produced entertainment designed not to challenge the system, but to standardize thinking and create artificial desires. That logic has only intensified. Today's cultural industry recycles safe, formulaic movies and franchises, monetizes trauma and rebellion without threatening ownership, sells identity and representation, while avoiding systematic critique. Hollywood focuses on reboots and superhero franchises. Music celebrates wealth, pain, or personal struggle without confronting class. Advertising lectures consumers about morality while relying on sweatshop labour. Games offer surface-level progressive narratives while maintaining exploitive monetization systems. It all looks rebellious, but it never challenges who owns that. As inequality worsens, corporations increasingly adopt identity-based messaging, not to redistribute power, but to protect markets. DEI initiatives, rainbow branding, and moral posturing function as insulation. They help companies avoid boycotts, appeal to global audiences, and shift conflict away from labour ownership, and profits. But this also creates a new enforcement mechanism. Deviating from approved narratives can trigger mob backlash, not from the state, but from online crowds and algorithmic suppression. Examples illustrate the pattern. Jerry Seinfeld's 2024 Duke commencement speech criticized political correctness and self-censorship in comedy. Pro-Palestinian protesters walked out, not over jokes, but over his political views. The message to creatives was clear: tread carefully. Gaming. Hogwarts Legacy faced intense boycotts over J.K. Rowling's views. Streamers were harassed, developers pressured, yet the game sold over 22 million copies and topped charts. The boycott failed, but the chilling effect remained. History repeats. The Sex Pistols' God Save the Queen was suppressed through chart manipulation and broadcast bans in the 1970s. Today, suppression happens through platforms, algorithms, and social pressure instead of state censors. The outcome is controlled chaos. Cultural conflict thrives, but real threats to capital don't. Extreme inequality also rewires empathy. Studies using brain imaging shows that when people view homeless individuals, the brain regions associated with social recognition often fail to activate. Disgust responses increase instead. Structural victims become invisible, while symbolic issues trigger outrage. This explains why society tolerates tent cities, but explodes over cultural missteps. Selective empathy is not accidental, it's conditioned. The culture industry trains people to care about market-safe causes, while ignoring systematic harm. AI accelerates everything capitalism already does badly. Firms deploy automation primarily to cut labour costs. Large portions of retail, transport, logistics, and even white-collar work are at risk. Millions of jobs are exposed, while the response remains the same: upskill or be left behind. Capitalism treats displacement as an externality. Profit is protected, workers absorb the damage. But technology doesn't have to function this way. Automation could reduce working hours, guarantee basic needs, and eliminate meaningless labour, if its benefits weren't privately captured. That's the core conflict. Who controls the machines? This is why alternatives are gaining attention, not out of nostalgia, but necessity. Market liberalization in former Soviet states devastated industries and communities. Financial crises repeatedly bail out banks, while workers suffer. Housing has become a speculative asset instead of shelter. Meanwhile, hybrid models like China's state capitalist system demonstrate that planning can scale infrastructure and reduce poverty, even with serious flaws. The lesson isn't imitation, but recognition. Markets alone don't guarantee dignity. Past communist experiments failed due to authoritarianism and technological limits. But modern automation, logistics, and productive capacity change the equation. Abundance is technically possible. Scarcity is increasingly artificial. Capitalism adapts by cutting costs. not caring for people. It responds to climate with green branding, to inequality with culture wars, and to AI with layoffs. It doesn't evolve toward dignity because profit has no consciousness. That's why frustration is rising among renters, workers, creators, and younger generations facing fewer opportunities than their parents. Not because ideology shifted, but because survival pressures did. This isn't a rant, it's an argument grounded in economics, psychology, culture, and technology. Inequality isn't a glitch. It's the system's operating code. Culture wars keep people divided. AI exposes capitalism's limits. And unless ownership and control change, the instability only accelerates. The question isn't whether the system is sustainable. It isn't. The question is what replaces it, and who gets to decide. Quick heads up before we keep going. I've got a Facebook page where I post a lot more of this stuff. It's not a business page, it's not monetized, and it's not a brand. It's a non-profit page. I run it purely because I think these conversations actually matter. No sponsors, no ads, no fake positivity, just raw clips, thoughts, arguments, humour, and uncomfortable topics people avoid. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm not pushing an agenda. It's just a place for people who still like thinking, questioning, disagreeing, and laughing without everything being cleaned up for algorithms. If you agree with me, disagree with me, or just want somewhere that isn't filtered to death, the link's there. You'll usually see stuff there before it ever hits YouTube. Alright, back to the video. Let's talk gaming. PlayStation Plus monthly games for February 2026 are Undisputed, Subnautica Below Zero, Ultros, and Ace Combat 7, Skies Unknown. I've resubscribed to PlayStation Plus this month, so you might notice some older gameplay popping up. Amazon Prime monthly games for February. Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, available today, Epic Game Store. Dread Templar, available today, Amazon Prime. Hex Guardian, available February 12th, Epic Games. Around the World, Travel to Brazil Collector's Edition, available February 12th, Legacy Game Code. Ambition, A Minute in Power, available February 19th, GOG. Captain Blood, February 19th, GOG. Meganoid, available February 19th, GOG. Rebel Galaxy Outlaw, February 26th, GOG. Total War, Atelier, February 26th, Epic Games. Tavern Talk, February 26th, Amazon Games app. I'm planning to add Tiny Tina's Wonderlands to my collection. But since it doesn't expire until May 7th, I'll hold off until closer to that date. That way, you can grab the free games for March and April too. Just pay the $10 subscription at any point before then and collect everything. Also worth noting, Botany Manor is currently free on Epic Games and mobile. From Feb 13th to 20th, you'll also be able to grab Nobody Wants to Die and The Dark Side Detective, A Fumble in the Dark. In other news, this might be one of our last chats here, for a short while, so I want to be real for a second. I've mentioned this before, but now that the first month of the year is done, time's ticking. By the end of the year, if I don't hit 1,000 subs, I'm stepping away. And here's why. A lot of my ideas get plagiarized without credit. Modern influencing is mostly performative, reacting to whatever's trending. Some people have good takes, sure, but most just complain without offering anything constructive. I try to offer alternatives, solutions, and a balanced perspective. I think in terms of building systems, not just reacting. But when I put ideas out there, others grab them and move on. No recognition, no originality, just recycling. So I'm done throwing ideas into the void. If I'm not seeing growth or recognition, I'm out. Let's see who actually builds something meaningful instead of just talking. I've already got a solid base of subscribers, and I genuinely appreciate everyone who supported the channel. A lot of my ideas are already out there now. It's up to the people. If you believe in the message, subscribe, share it around, and help the channel grow. Much love, everyone. Nobody wants to die, but everyone wants their voices heard. In politics, you will never please everyone. And when people get ignored or dismissed, they don't simply disappear. They look for other ways to express that frustration. That's why we're seeing more extreme rhetoric today. Many people are outraged over issues they barely considered years ago. Not always because their lives suddenly changed, but because media ecosystems amplify certain narratives and reward emotional intensity. Clinging to extreme talking points becomes less about belief and more about being seen and heard. Most people don't actually want to sacrifice comfort or security. What they want is acknowledgement. So instead of radical action, they gravitate towards radical language, a low-risk way of expressing dissatisfaction without appending their lives. We are clearly entering a new era, and resisting new ideas won't stop that shift. I don't agree with everything the media promotes, but the underlying signal is real. Society is hungry for change. Humans are inherently flawed, and history shows that civilizations eventually collapse under those flaws. The emergence of AI could either accelerate that collapse or help balance it. Used responsibly, it offers a way to reduce human bias, inefficiency, and short-term thinking. What we need isn't a blind faith in technology, but a government capable of using it carefully, with ideas that genuinely benefit everyone, not just the loudest voices or most powerful interests. A system based on more equal distribution doesn't mean stripping people of their right to live well. It means setting limits on how much power can be accumulated through wealth. The reality is that extreme concentration of wealth benefits a very small minority, while the costs are distributed across everyone else. Asking those at the top to contribute more isn't punishment. It's a stabilizing mechanism. They would still live comfortably, still innovate, still enjoy life, What changes is that no one gets to tower so far above society that they can shape outcomes solely in their own interest. In an AI-driven society, where productivity increasingly comes from systems rather than individual labour, shared distribution becomes not just ethical, but practical. When everyone benefits from automation, people are freed to pursue creativity, problem solving, and meaningful work driven by passion rather than survival. The resistance comes not from fear of poverty, but from fear of losing control. And that distraction matters. I'd just like to close on this. I've been uploading like crazy lately, 3 times a day. So I might ease up a bit in February. Planning to get into some live streams in March though. I'll most likely kick things off with Resident Evil towards the end of February. Then around mid-March, move into the new WWE 2K game. I'm planning to run General Manager mode again, merging the AEW roster like I did in past streams. It should be a good time. This is really about growing the channel and diversifying the content. I'll probably take a small step back from political, cultural, and social topics for a bit, and lean into other areas to see what sticks. This channel has always been a mix of ideas, and I'm doing my best to reach that subscriber goal. I don't want to walk away. But if by the end of the year I don't hit the target, I may need to step back. Maybe not completely, but in a healthier way. Doing this takes a lot of time, energy, and mental bandwidth. And I want to be honest about that. Now back to the video.
Homelessness services are warning they will need to make very difficult choices about who to help and who to turn away unless the government increases support. Peak Body Homelessness Australia reports more children and families are sleeping in cars and couch surfing, with women and girls bearing the brunt of this serious crisis. Today marks the start of National Homelessness Week, and joining us this afternoon from the Women and Girls Emergency Centre in Sydney is Nicole Yade. Nicole, thanks so much for joining us on this incredibly important issue.
Thank you.
Why is homelessness getting worse in this country?
I just think, unfortunately, the cost of living, is getting harder for absolutely everyone at the moment. And we just haven't seen the investment in homelessness services that we're needing to really keep up with the demand that we have in our services, very sadly. When we're thinking about women, of course, domestic violence is a really big cause of homelessness for women and children. So, we're not seeing that change enough either, unfortunately.
So in regards, Nicole, to government funding, all of us know the benefits in stopping homelessness. There are so many benefits on so many different levels as a society, but also for services. Why wouldn't the government give more funds and support to stop our homelessness crisis?
It's a really good question. I think we need to see more investment in services to make sure that women and children, but all homeless people, get the support they need as early as possible to really make change for them in their lives and for everyone in the community. I started my day this morning down at Central Station in Sydney with some incredible people doing some incredible work with rough sleepers, and it is completely heartbreaking in the middle of winter and all this rain to see people outside and not getting the support they need. So those resources are really essential to change this and turn it around.
Nicole, one thing we do know is homelessness does not discriminate. It can affect anyone at any time, and especially with our housing crisis, literally a couple of weeks, if you lose your job in particular, can be devastating.
Absolutely. That's what we're seeing on the front line as well. You know, people who traditionally didn't come into homelessness services are now reaching out for support because they just can't do it by themselves. So the demand is massive. And what we find at the Women and Girls Emergency Centre is, you know, sometimes 3, 4, 5 families when we have a vacancy, just one room available, our frontline staff trying to make those impossible decisions about who gets the room tonight. So we just think support should be in place for all of those families and all the people who need it.
They are not screwing you over by accident. They are doing it because the system pays them to. That's the whole rant in one line. But let's walk through it properly. Look around you. Groceries cost more. Rent is a joke. Power bills are a jump scare. Farmers are going under. Small businesses you grew up with will have vanished. Meanwhile, the stock market hits record highs. Property prices are resilient. Boomers are running around on cruises. And politicians tell you the economy is strong. Strong for who? You are not crazy. It's not just you mismanaging your money. This thing is built to push people like you into permanent stress while pretending that if you just hustle harder, you'll join the winners club. You won't. That club is invitation only, and the invitations were sent out decades ago. Let's start where this modern phase really ramped up. COVID. When governments hit the big red shut everything down button, they didn't design some elegant, fair plan. They panicked. They locked down. And they decided who was essential and who was disposable. If you were a big corporation, a major airline, a bank, or anything systematically important, you got lifelines. You got ultra cheap money. You got support packages. You got central banks promising to do whatever it takes to keep markets from imploding. If you're a small business, good luck. One huge early pandemic survey of small businesses in the US found that 43% of them were temporarily closed, and their staffing levels had fallen by nearly 40%. Think about that. Almost half the small businesses in that sample shut down their doors. Jobs evaporated. Families that relied on that shop, that cafe, that barber, suddenly had nothing. Another analyst showed closure rates for small firms jumping more than 3 percentage points above normal in 2020. More than twice the increase of large companies. Tens of millions of people either couldn't work or had their hours slashed because their employer had closed or lost business thanks to COVID. Support existed, sure. But the reality was brutal. Small operators burned through savings, took on emergency loans, and are now stuck repaying that debt in a world of higher interest rates and lower customer spending. Meanwhile, the big guys consolidated. The weak died. The giants got fatter. COVID was a controlled demolition of the small-scale economy. They didn't call it that, but that's what it was. And as they were busy bulldozing small businesses, another group was getting strangled a bit more slowly. Farmers. If you want to know how much your government actually cares about feeding the nation, look at how farmers are doing. In places like the US, by 2025, farm bankruptcies were climbing again. Court records showed hundreds of family farms filing for Chapter 12 bankruptcy. With the number of cases in early 2025 already about a third higher than the entire previous year. Why? Because prices for what they sell, crops, livestock, drifted down to old levels, while the cost of everything they need stayed inflated. Fertilizer, chemicals, seed, diesel, machinery, insurance, all still expensive. Even after support payments, farmers were staring at something like $50 billion in accumulated loans over a few years. You can't survive on negative margins forever. You bleed equity, and then your land. Then you are done. And here's the kicker. Government policy helped do this. Trade wars and tariffs, tough on China posturing, export market chaos. Farmers didn't ask for any of that. But they are the ones who lose buyers, get lower prices, and carry the risk. Whether disasters hit harder and more often, smashing harvests, burning paddocks, flooding fields, climate change, which politicians pretend is some far-off thing, is already punching the farm sector in the face. So small business in town is dying. Farms out of town are going under. And what are you told? The economy is transitioning. Transitioning into what? A world where the only people left owning anything real are giant corporations and investment funds? All of this could maybe be excused as unfortunate if the pain was shared, if everyone was tightening belts together. But that's not what happened. While you were wondering if you could afford meat this week, someone else was having the best run of their life. Look at corporate profits during and after the crisis. For decades, profits usually explained about 10% of price increases. The rest was wages and other costs. But in the recent surge, detailed breakdowns show profits were responsible for more than half of the jump in prices. Over 50%. More than all other factors combined in some periods. That means companies didn't just pass on higher costs. They dialed up their markups. They charged more than they needed to just to maintain margins. And they didn't apologize. They bragged. Executives literally told investors on earnings calls that they were using the inflation narrative to raise prices up and keep them there. Even as some of their own input costs were starting to fall. Profit margins. When you strip out finance, hit record levels not seen since the 1950s. While you were doing mental gymnastics in front of the supermarket fridge, deciding whether you can justify cheese this week, some CEO is cashing a bonus because he successfully leveraged inflation to expand margins. This is what people call greedflation. It's not a meme, it's a spreadsheet. And when inflation pops off because of this mix, supply shocks, energy prices, corporate greed, what do central banks do? Do they cap prices? Do they tax windfall profits? Do they lean on firms to back off? No. They come for you. They jack interest rates. That's their magic trick. They see prices going up and decide the solution is to deliberately slow the economy by making your debt more expensive. Mortgages, credit cards, small business loans, car loans. They all get hammered. If you own a place on a variable rate, your repayments go through the roof. If you rent, your landlord uses their increased costs as an excuse to hike your rent. In countries like Australia, everyday prices have risen by around the low 20s in percent terms since 2020. With energy, fuel, and housing as some of the biggest drivers. Wages have lagged behind that, meaning even if your pay went up, what it actually buys went down. And their fix is to squeeze you harder, make repayments higher, crush demand. They treat your entire life like a thermostat. So you end up with a whole generation of people who are permanent renters, permanent one bad month away from disaster. Ownership. That was for your grandparents. Speaking of grandparents, let's talk about them. Baby boomers. Everyone's favourite topic. This isn't about hating anyone. It's about looking at the scoreboard. In the US, boomers make up roughly 20% of the population, but control just over half of all household wealth. About 50 to 52%. That's tens of trillions of dollars. Millennials and Gen Z combined have only a fraction of that, despite working their guts out in a more productive economy than ever. Boomers didn't do this by being uniquely disciplined. They were born into a golden run. Cheap housing, rising wages, dirt cheap or even free university, strong unions, and tax systems that weren't yet completely rigged to worship capital. Then they sat through 40 years where interest rates trended down. Governments propped up asset prices every time there was a scare. And housing, stocks, and super balances went into orbit. Now, in their 60s and 70s, they are sitting on portfolios made out of your rent. Investment, properties, shares, trusts. Every time you pay rent, someone smiles. So when the government looks at a housing crash, it doesn't see finally affordability. It sees the retirement accounts of the most politically powerful voting bloc just got torched. They cannot be allowed. So everything, from zoning rules to tax breaks, gets bent to support prices. Negative gearing, capital gains discounts, land tax loopholes, all perfectly normal. Try seriously taxing wealth, and suddenly it's a class war. But they've been waging class war on you quietly for decades. In Australia, you feel this on a whole other level because of how energy and housing are stitched into the cost of living crisis. We are a fossil fuel superpower. Coal, gas, you name it. We export the stuff. We brag about it. And yet, Aussies open their power bill and their jaw hits the floor. Petrol, gas, electricity. These have been some of the nastiest price rises over the last few years. Research here is crystal clear. Fossil fuels and their volatility have been a major driver of higher bills. On top of that, the climate damage those fuels cause is already showing up in your bank statement. Insurance in disaster-prone areas is going ballistic. Some families are spending more than 7 weeks of their gross income just to insure their homes Floods, fires, storms knock out crops and infrastructure, driving up food prices and taxes to pay for repairs. Food alone is up about 20% since 2020. And extreme weather is one of the culprits. So you get punched twice. Once by the price of fuel, and again by the fallout from burning it. Now you'd think a government that bends on about cost of living would go after the root causes. Shift hard into cheaper renewables. Tighten rules on energy companies. Protect households first. Instead, Labor plays both sides. They stand at the mic telling you they care about families struggling with bills. They talk about climate targets. Then in the background, they keep signing off on new and expended coal and gas projects. Dozens of them, locking in billions of tons of emissions and decades more dependency on volatile fossil fuel exports. The Albanese government has already approved multiple massive coal mine expansions and major gas projects, all while pretending we are on some heroic transition path. So no, it's not that they are refusing to use our national resources. They are absolutely using them, just not for you. They dig and drill here, flog it overseas, and you pay close to export level prices at home while eating the climate damage. Meanwhile, renewables are now the cheapest way to generate new electricity in Australia. Though because of decades of policy cowardice, the rollout has been messy. The grid is underbuilt, and big players are still allowed to gain prices. Households haven't fully felt the benefit yet. So politicians blame green policies for higher bills, when in reality, it's fossil fuel volatility, cartel-like behaviour and half-baked transition planning causing most of the pain. And don't even start on plastics and consumer crap. Every year we get a new ban on straws or bags, but the shelves are still loaded with single-use plastic, petro-based junk, and pointless packaging. The responsibility gets dumped on you. Recycle better. Use a keep cup. Be a conscious consumer. Meanwhile, the corporations pumping out plastic mountains keep running, largely untouched. So you are told climate is your fault if you don't bring a tote bag, while the government waves through new coal mines. On top of all this, there's immigration, which is the favourite chew toy for politicians who don't want you looking up. Let's be real. In Australia, record migration has clearly added pressure to housing and especially rentals. When you have a broken housing system, underbuilt supply, and landlords milking everything they can, pouring hundreds of thousands of new people into that market quickly is going to push up competition and rents in the short term. Studies show that an immigration inflow equal to 1% of a local population can bump local house prices by just under 1% a year. And recent data here backs up that migration spikes and rent spikes have moved together. But here's what is lazy and wrong. Blaming migrants as the main cause of the crisis. Migrants also work, pay tax, start businesses, and fill gaps. Long term, most research finds that they don't destroy overall wages. They increase demand too. The real issue is governments using high migration to pump GDP and plug skill holes, while refusing to fix land tax, negative gearing, planning rules, and public housing. It's not that there are too many people, it's that there is too much profit in keeping housing scarce and expensive. So when some politician goes on TV blaming international students or refugees for your rent, understand that as a pure misdirection. They want you fighting the guy who just arrived with a backpack instead of the guy who owns 10 houses. Now while all of this is happening, COVID wipeouts, farmer bankruptcies, energy scams, boomer hoarding, greedflation, governments are quietly hacking away at the one thing that could stop people from completely collapsing: the safety net. In the UK, for example, the government's own impact assessments admit that their new welfare policies, including cuts and stricter tests for health-related benefits, will push hundreds of thousands more people into poverty by 2030, including tens of thousands of children. Welfare spending as a share of the economy is planned to shrink, even as living costs stay high. Charities and think tanks are warning that sanctions, delays and cuts are driving people into food banks, unmanageable debt, and mental and physical health crises. In Australia, income support rates have been left near poverty levels. And while cost of living packages throw the odd one-off payment at people, the underlying rates and housing stock stay broken. Public housing is a joke relative to need. The days of treating housing, healthcare, and utilities as basic rights are gone. Now they are products, and you are a customer. So here's where it all connects. You crush small business and let big corporate players dominate. You squeeze farmers until only the biggest survive. You let boomers and the already rich hoard over half the wealth, mostly in assets younger people can't afford. You allow corporations to jack up markups and call it inflation. You raise interest rates to tame that inflation, smashing borrowers and renters. You fail to manage energy and climate, so you get hit by both fossil fuel price spikes and climate disaster bills. You blame migrants and individuals as a distraction, and you quietly weaken welfare and public services so that when people fall, they don't bounce, they break. Tell me how that doesn't look like a system designed to wipe out the possibility of a stable, secure lower class. Not wipe out people literally, wipe out their stability, wipe out their ownership, wipe out their margin for error. Turn them into a permanent pool of stressed renters and desperate workers who can't afford to say no. By 2030, if nothing major changes, you will see more of the same. More people in precarious housing, share houses, cars, couch surfing. More families one bill away from choosing between food and rent. More farmers gone. More small businesses dead. More wealth piled at the top. The lower class won't disappear. It will just live in a constant fear and insecurity. And that's exactly how the system likes it. Because people who are constantly stressed about money are easy to manage. They don't strike. They don't protest. They don't organise. They are too busy surviving. So don't apologise for being angry. Don't water it down. Just be clear. This is not about some cartoon villain in a smoke-filled room. It's about incentives. The people at the top are doing exactly what the system rewards them for doing. Protecting assets, protecting profits, protecting themselves. And every solution they roll out, interest rate hikes, temporary rebates, little one-off payments, is designed to keep the game going, not to change it. Straight down the lens. And tell the guy watching this on his phone in a shitty rental, you are not a failure for struggling. You are the product. Your rent is someone else's retirement plan. Your bills are someone else's bonus. Your stress is someone else's stability. And until enough people see that clearly and start saying no, at the ballot box, at work, in how they talk about this stuff, nothing changes. They are not going to save you. They don't even see you. That's why you are pissed off. That's why this video needs to exist.